From KARK4 and Fox 16, this is a special report. Here's Mitch McCoy.
And good day to you. You're looking at live right now near the state capitol, UAMS in the background. Symbolic photo there as the special session ends. Lawmakers called to the Capitol to discuss overturning the state's ban on masks, specifically that mask mandate preventing schools in Arkansas from enacting its own mask mandate. The special session ended earlier today, and lawmakers have left with very little action, only passing the federal pandemic unemployment assistance program, basically seizing the state stopping the state from using federal funds of that program. I want to bring you to live pictures that we are monitoring right now. We're told the governor is going to be speaking in the matter of moments. This is a meeting that he scheduled late last night with reporters after we saw a lot of action across our state, including right here in the capital city. Good afternoon to you, everyone. I'm Mitch McCoy. We're watching live coverage here on Fox 16, on television, and across all of our digital platforms. You see reporters setting up their mics right now, and the governor is going to speak here in just a moment. Let me set the scene for what this speech might include. We have seen the city of Little Rock impose a mask mandate across all public places. That mask mandate was put into effect while the current ban was still in place. So basically the mayor defying state law. The two committees yesterday in the House voted down two bills that would have basically overturned the state's ban on mask mandates. So long story short, there was very little action from the special session, but a lot of action in the city of Little Rock. Then this morning, a Pulaski County judge granted a temporary restraining order, which is blocking the state from enforcing that law. So at this point, institutions, city government, schools, legally, because of that Pulaski County judge, can impose mask mandates. There is a lot of drama circulating around all of this. So just to set the scene for you on how this is all playing out and why what the governor could be saying here in just a matter of moments is going to have a significant impact moving forward, not just on this law, but how the state of Arkansas is going to respond to this now temporary restraining order that is in place, how the state of Arkansas is going to respond to maybe future cities or future school districts from imposing their own mask mandates, despite what's happening in the legal court system, the judicial system. So there's a lot here to listen to. There's a lot to monitor here as Governor Asa Hutchinson is walking into the room holding this press briefing. Let's listen in live. Again, his first briefing since the special session ended. Little action regarding masks. Let's listen in.
And I want to make some comments, and then we'll turn it open for questions that you might have. And in terms of starting off, as everyone knows, I had one primary objective in calling the legislature into session this last week. And that objective is to provide flexibility for local school districts to protect their students under 12 who cannot protect themselves. That was my objective, and yes, we added to the call, which I'm glad we did, and I'm grateful for the legislature approving the opt-out of the extra unemployment benefits. Allows people to return to work more quickly. That was an objective that was accomplished, but my primary mission was to provide flexibility for local school districts during this pandemic, as that age group cannot be vaccinated. Today, the General Assembly adjourned and went home without further action and without taking action on amending Act 1002. That is disappointing to me. There were a number of legislators, including Representative Julie Mayberry, who took this seriously, supported a change, and understood the risk to our children, and I applaud those legislators. But there were many who had a casual, if not cavalier, attitude toward this public health emergency and toward the remedy that I suggested to them in addressing the vacuum, really, of the age group that was not able to be vaccinated. What concerns me is that many are simply listening to the loudest voices and not standing up with compassion, common sense, and serious action. But my objective has been achieved, not by legislative action, but by the court decision today of Judge Fox, who ruled that Act 1002 is unconstitutional and an overreach of authority. The decision reaffirms my statement earlier this week that I regret signing Act 1002. It needed to be changed because of the new reality with the Delta variant, but it failed to recognize the limits on legislative authority over the different branches of our state government. So really two reasons that that was problematic. One, I identified that it did not recognize the potential for the new Delta variant that came in as somewhat as a surprise to everyone, somewhat understandable. The second one, of course, is that it did not recognize the limits on legislative authority. Now, where does this leave us? First of all, I do support the decision of Judge Fox. I thought it was well-reasoned. I thought it was limited, but it was well-reasoned and certainly constitutionally based. The other point I would make is as to where it leaves me, and it's important to emphasize this. While this gives me authority as governor to act under my emergency powers, there will be no statewide mask mandate. Let me make that clear. Because as I have emphasized, that we have one remedy that we want to focus on, and that is getting vaccinated. And that the solution to moving out of this pandemic is vaccinations and everybody using their individual judgment beyond that. The schools, though, have the now independent authority to address that gap in the unvaccinated population of under 12. And that was my objective to begin with. The schools now have that independent authority to act as needed to protect the children. And then third, my focus will continue to be vaccinations. And so I'll continue with the community COVID conversations. I'll be going to Clinton and to Camden next week. And I look forward between now and school to really try to increase our vaccination rate to make sure that we have the best chance for a successful school year and normalcy in the future. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Do you think the state should appeal this ruling? And also, going back to what you were talking about with the loudest voices in the room, past couple days we saw hearings where there were people just putting out just completely false information about the virus, the vaccines, even one woman saying COVID doesn't exist. Were you surprised to see that level of disinformation, and do you see any way to pierce through that at all?
Well, first of all, I think it reflects a minority of our population. I think you have some that have put it off getting a vaccination. I think you have some that have studied the issue and might have some unique health needs that they're concerned about and need to consult with a physician. And then you do have that small minority of the population that has adopted the myths, the conspiracy theories, and have continued to spread those. And that's harmful. It is not fact-based, and regretfully, that has caught the attention of some legislators even. And so, you know, we expect more from those who are leaders to sort through that and to lead with compassion and thoughtfulness. And so I do believe it's a minority, but they're very loud. And so let's not listen to the loudest voices. Let's listen to the most logical, scientific-based and medical-based and trusted advisors in making our decisions. You asked me, though, the question about the state. The Attorney General represents the state in this action, and she has a responsibility to defend the laws that have been passed by the legislature. I have a different role. I've been sued in my official capacity and I'm a party to that, and I will likely have a different direction in the event the state would appeal on that, because I do support Judge Fox's ruling.
Governor, do you think it could be said that the special session was a waste of time and resources, given that part of the call was not accomplished, and going in knowing you might not have the votes for that measure, what do you think was accomplished on that front?
Two answers to that. First of all, it's never a waste of money to give the legislature an opportunity to do the right thing, and that's what we did. They asked for this authority in legislation that we agreed to, the Emergency Powers Act, and they have this opportunity to be a part of the decision making. I'm disappointed in the outcome, but that's part of their responsibility, and they had the opportunity to exercise that responsibility. Secondly, of course, it wasn't a waste of time, because it was a very, very important decision that was made on the expanded unemployment benefits that needed to be resolved urgently, and it was, and I'm grateful for their action on that.
Governor, we've had some schools quarantining students. Easted, I heard today, is having to quarantine some, and you had what's happening in Marion, both happening right after school started. Are you worried here in a week and a half, when more school districts start, we'll see more districts entering this, and should schools still reopen as scheduled?
They should reopen as scheduled, because it might not be any better 4 weeks from now. And so we don't want to cancel school. Parents are relying upon it. Students need to have that continued learning experience. And so we need school. It's important, and we should start on time. We do need to maximize the week and a half between now and then. And yes, I am concerned that if we don't have high enough vaccination rate even within the schools, that we're going to have cases. And so I think people are motivated. We see the vaccination rate going up, and we want to do everything we can in the next week and a half to increase that, and hopefully that will minimize the both cases, but also those that are quarantined. And if you look at Marion School District, it was not an astronomical number that was positive, but the quarantine list was so high, hundreds. And that's what we want to avoid as well, because that hurts the learning of everybody. That can be avoided by vaccinations. That can be avoided if they have the capacity for better spacing and things, but that's limited in many schools. So vaccination is the answer, but it's certainly not canceling school. Yeah, let's go back to the back and we'll come up here. Yes.
Can you hear me very well?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is probably easier. Okay. So I know you're not done with the community COVID conversations so far, but I wanted to ask that so far, with all the cities that you've been to and people you've talked to, what are some of the most important things that you've learned from these town hall meetings, and what could still be done to convince unvaccinated or Kansas to get vaccinated?
First of all, I've learned that people respond whenever there is such a great need, and so like in Batesville, I leave and they start a working group there in the community to help expand vaccinations availability. I've learned that the most trusted advisor is not the government, but the most trusted advisor is someone in the community that they trust. And so having that conversation between community leaders, medical professionals, talking about this serious issue that impacts us all has had the greatest influence. And so people want honest conversations. They want respectful conversations, and we hope that we can continue that environment. Jay.
You said in the past that you didn't want parts of the state doing different things. So I guess how do you react to Little Rock's mask mandate, and do you think that that will end up setting a precedent going forward for other cities, municipalities to do the same?
Great question, Jay. And first of all, the decision of the mayor of Little Rock to have a mask mandate is very, very limited. It is for the public spaces that are city controlled, and that's not any different in my view than the you know, a private business. I mean, it is a government, but that's a limited statement and ruling that he has made. Now, I'm not saying that I would make the same ruling, but it is very limited, and it's been construed to be much broader than that, and it's very narrow. Secondly, absolutely, you've got a memory because you've been through this pandemic just like us all, and I did want to have a statewide policy, and that's why we had no mandates, and then we had a statewide mandate, and we tried to avoid piecemealing the state. We kept that philosophy. Well, because now there's not that same authority that I have, and it's all subject to legislative review and use of my emergency powers, that makes it more difficult. And so theoretically, I could do a statewide order under my emergency powers, but I don't think that would last too long. And so what that leaves us with is the second option, and it might be more appropriate now as we know more, as we have you know, more tools to work with, and vaccines are out there, that we do have school districts can make individual decisions, and the colleges can make different decisions, and people can have their choice within that. So that's just where we are, and I doubt that that's what the legislature wanted, but that's the result of the combination of legislative action and the court ruling.
So do you foresee kind of the state sort of piecemealing this thing, kind of as they're reacting to the pandemic in their general area, and we've got, you know, different things in different parts of the state?
Well, sure. I think there's many school boards that's not going to adopt mask mandates or other restrictions. They're going to follow, you know, public health guidelines, and it's the recommendations that are out there, but they're not going to impose anything more than that. I think the vast majority of school districts will probably take that path. But clearly, the Marion School District, Little Rock School District was involved in that litigation. I presume that they will go a different direction. And it should be based upon what's the spread of the virus in the community, what are the cases, what are the concerns, and what's the best way to address it. And that's the beauty of it. I don't want Washington telling me as a state what to do on a national standard. Well, at this point, when we have vaccines available, local school districts can make the decision, as well as private business, as well as public institutions.
Hey, Governor, a quick question as far as the hospitals, the stress, you've got people walking out on the job. You know, I know that the CEO of Children's the other day had mentioned that she's not worried about the beds, she just needs about another 100 nurses to actually tend to those beds. Are there any other further incentives or any conversations happening as far as competitive rates? You know, I know we're competing with several states around us.
And the answer is yes. First of all, I've approved expansion of bed space in hospitals through Mercy Health System in Van Buren and in Little Rock, as well as Unity Health in Searcy, to expand beds to open up more. Obviously, and that does include the personnel, the healthcare personnel that will go with those beds that are needed, and so that's something that we're funding. Secondly, in terms of all the hospitals, the community hospitals, those that have had to deal with COVID patients, I have recommended that there's a $200 million package that would be beneficial for retention of those existing personnel that in our hospitals that have been under such stress. That still awaits legislative review. But that is something that makes sense. It's a big investment, but it's a necessary investment to make sure that we're not turning people away from hospitals when they need care.
Do you think those measures are going to be enough, or do you think we're going to excuse me, have to do more as the number of people in the hospital continues to go up?
We're going to have to continue to monitor it. First of all, the steps that we have taken is going to open up new bed space probably 3 weeks from now. So we've got to make sure we're ready, can handle it between now and then. And then we just have to measure it beyond that. I think that does give us the breathing room. In the meantime, A joint letter went out yesterday, I believe it was, signed by the Secretary Romero and the Arkansas Hospital Association, working in conjunction with all the hospitals, that they voluntarily, as a state, work to open up 10% of the bed space for COVID patients. And so that's sort of a voluntary agreement that has been recited in a letter. We took that step, 6 months ago. We need to take that step now, and so that should provide some immediate management of the bed space to allow us to get through until the other beds are opened up. All right, yes, sir.
You were mentioning a little bit earlier about sort of wanting to see the vaccination rates increase and sort of how these community forums are working. I was wondering if there's been any conversation in your office about sort of how to reach some of the students that are in these high schools, and sort of if there's been any goals on providing incentives or anything like that.
Yes, absolutely. Numerous conversations, and I've talked with Secretary Key. I've challenged the Department of Education to have a specific program that we can implement that will encourage vaccination among our high school students, all the schools engaged in it. And so they're working on that. And even beyond that, there's many schools that are taking those steps, just as a routine matter, or as they get prepared for school. So that is a great need that we have, and we are working hard to accomplish that within the school, but also on a statewide basis.
Going back to on the ruling, just to make sure I understand something, are you planning on filing something with the eventual appeal to the state Supreme Court? Are you planning on filing something asking the court to keep Fox's ruling in place?
We need to see how that develops, and the Attorney General, I want to see what steps the Attorney General on behalf of the state intends to take, and then based upon that, I will determine whether I should have separate representation, speaking for the governor in my official capacity, as to how I should articulate the support for Judge Fox's ruling, and and potentially any disagreement with the other parties to the suit, or the Attorney General's office. And so it's a little bit unusual, but you've got in that case the pro tem Jimmy Hickey, you've got Speaker Matthew Shepard, and myself in our official capacities, and we all have a little bit different view of this. And then you got the Attorney General that represents broadly the state of Arkansas. And so I think the Attorney General's office has done an incredible job in representing me in a whole host of issues, but clearly would be a conflict in the event there's an appeal on this. And I want to be able to have my independent voice, and I want to be able to speak to the court directly about my views on Act 1002.
But that is a possibility, asking separately for
yes.
the court.
Yes. All right, I think we've covered today. Thanks for coming on a Friday afternoon, but I thought it was timely and important. Y'all be safe this weekend, and I just want to add that one of the most effective tools that we have in getting through this pandemic is the media. What you all have done in giving us coverage, print and broadcast and radio, is extraordinary, and just your communication to the public is something we couldn't do without. So thank you all.
Governor Asa Hutchinson speaking for the very first time since the special session ended. The special session wrapped up early this morning with very little action. The governor saying that he was disappointed in lawmakers for not amending that act, which bans school districts, local governments, from imposing mask mandates in their local areas. He says that he calls it disappointing, but he says that he supports a Pulaski County judge's decision to temporarily block the ban. And it's in the judicial system now because of lawsuits that are underway. Pulaski County judge late this morning granted a temporary restraining order blocking the state's law on banning mask mandates. So short answer is that school districts and local governments can now impose their own mask mandates. The governor saying that he supports that decision, which I don't think it would go without saying that this would be one of those decisions by the governor that is going against the majority of his party, at least for now, considering that the lawmakers were called to the state capitol, and lawmakers decided not to take up that issue. Of course, those proposals, those bills, were voted down in a House committee. We have live continuing coverage throughout the day on KRK.com and Fox16.com. For our viewers joining us on TV, also on digital, thank you for joining. This has been a special report. I'm Mitch McCoy. Good day.